Please, James, you're scaring the baby. Emily Sinclair's desperate scream echoed through the million-dollar kitchen in Beverly Hills as shards of crystal shattered against the gleaming granite wall. 7 months pregnant, Emily stood there, hands clutching her belly to protect her unborn daughter, while her husband's face, James Whitaker, the tech mogul, twisted into a terrifying rage. A small argument over dinner plans exploded into a living hell. A shove sent her staggering, pain radiated through her, and a familiar fear tightened its grip around her heart. 5 years of a seemingly perfect marriage now laid bare: control, isolation, and financial abuse. But in that moment, Emily dialed 911, a decision that would change everything. Have you ever felt trapped in your own dream home? Don't miss this journey out of hell, because it could save your very life. Emily Sinclair's scream tore through the quiet Beverly Hills night as expensive crystal shards shattered against the gleaming granite wall, a chaotic symphony signaling collapse. In the sprawling kitchen, where the chandelier's light reflected in dazzling splendor, Emily, 7 months pregnant, stood amid an emotional storm, hands clutching her belly to shield her unborn daughter, kicking frantically inside as if sensing danger. Her husband, James Whitaker, a tech mogul whose smile once captivated Silicon Valley, now revealed his true self, eyes icy sharp, voice cutting like a blade. The argument began over something seemingly trivial: dinner plans. Emily, with swollen feet and aching back, craved a quiet night with takeout pizza and Netflix. But James, in his perfectly pressed Armani suit, insisted she attend a charity gala in downtown Los Angeles, where he could flaunt his success and craft the image of the perfect husband. For James, this wasn't about dinner, it was about control, a skill he had honed to an art form over their 5-year marriage. At 29, Emily once believed she knew what love was. It was the early days of dating, when James gifted her crimson roses and first-class tickets to Paris. It was promises of a dazzling future, where she'd be queen of his million-dollar empire. But now, in the showroom-like kitchen, she felt the invisible rope James had wound around her tightening with each passing day. He called her Emily, not the sweet M of old, as a way to assert dominance, as if her name were a weapon he could wield. When she resisted the gala, his voice turned to a growl. "Don't be so dramatic, Emily. You're carrying my child." Those words, cloaked in concern, were a stark reminder that she belonged to him, body and fate. The first shove came out of nowhere, like a cold gust slicing through her skin. Emily stumbled, hands instinctively cradling her belly, feeling her daughter's fierce kicks like a plea for help. The back pain, the doctor's advice to rest, all flooded her mind, but James only laughed coldly, a smile she once found charming, now resembling a predator's grin. "The doctor works for me, remember? She says what I tell her," he said, his tone flat, as if reading a business contract. Emily tried to whisper a plea, but the words caught in her throat. She had once been a sharp marketing director at Apex Communications in San Francisco, running million-dollar campaigns, but now, in her own home, she felt small, like a bird trapped in a gilded cage. The second shove was harder, deliberate. Emily's hip slammed into the granite counter's edge, the crack echoing like a deadly warning. Pain surged from her hip up her spine, leaving her gasping, hands gripping the counter to stay upright. But the worst was yet to come. With chilling calm, James threaded his fingers into her glossy brown hair, yanking her head back. The force was enough to draw tears, each strand of hair snapping free like fragments of her stolen freedom. She looked into his eyes, no longer the man she loved, but a stranger, a controller who had turned love into a prison. 5 years with James had eroded her every belief about marriage, about herself. She once thought she was strong, but now she felt weak, trapped in a script James had written. Yet, in that agonizing moment, a fire ignited within Emily. Not fear, her constant companion for too long, but determination, sharp as the crystal shards at her feet. Her trembling hand snatched the phone from the counter, fingers racing across the screen. "Here we go," she whispered to her unborn daughter, feeling kicks like a chorus of agreement. The number 911 flashed, and she pressed call, her small but steady voice piercing the night. James, still gripping her hair, hadn't yet realized this act would shatter his empire of control. The phone rang once, twice, and Emily's heart pounded like a war drum, heralding the battle to come. She wasn't just calling for help, she was calling back her own life. The phone rang once, twice, like the pounding heartbeat in Emily Sinclair's chest, slicing through the stifling air of the opulent Beverly Hills kitchen. Her trembling hand gripped the phone tightly, while James Whittaker's fingers still clenched her glossy brown hair, as if trying to drag her back into the invisible prison he had built over 5 years. But when the calm voice of the 911 operator sounded, 911, what's your emergency? A spark of determination flared in Emily's eyes. 7 months pregnant, she felt her daughter kicking fiercely inside, as if reminding her she wasn't fighting just for herself. With a clear, though quivering voice, she declared, "My husband just attacked me. I'm 7 months pregnant and need help immediately." Those words, sharp as a blade, cut through the web of lies James had spun. James's face, usually polished to charm Silicon Valley investors, shifted from rage to confusion, then flushed red as if slapped. He released her hair, not out of remorse, but to calculate. "Emily, sweetheart," he said, his voice suddenly soft, as if playing a role in a Hollywood film he directed himself. "You're hormonal. Hang up." But Emily saw through his act. She saw the expensive gifts, the Louis Vuitton bag, the Maldives vacation, always paired with apologies after misunderstandings. She recalled the times he convinced her she was too sensitive, too dramatic, or just a pregnant girl swayed by hormones. Each of James's words was a brick in the wall of isolation, distancing her from friends, family, and the talented marketing director she once was at Apex Communications. Emily stood firm, though her hip throbbed from the shove against the granite counter. "My address is 1423 Oakwood Lane, Beverly Hills," she said, her voice growing stronger, as if each word was a step out of the darkness. James began pacing, like a caged beast in the glass cage of their $1 million mansion. He ran a hand through his hair, checked his phone, likely texting lawyers or powerful friends to mitigate damage to his reputation. Reputation, which he valued more than his wife and child, was built on charity galas and speeches about artificial intelligence. But now, that aura was faltering. The distant wail of police sirens grew closer, like drumbeats heralding an approaching storm. Red and blue lights flashed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the white walls with chaotic streaks, mirroring Emily's turbulent mind. She heard the firm, decisive knock at the door. Without hesitation, Emily walked to open it, each step like leaping across a chasm. 2 officers appeared. Detective Laura Ramirez, an older woman with kind but piercing eyes, as if she had seen through hundreds of stories like this in her 15 years on the job. And young Officer Tom Bradley, looking fresh from the academy, his face serious, but slightly awkward. "I'm the one who called," Emily said, her voice ringing like a proclamation. It wasn't just an answer to the police, it was a declaration that she would no longer let James script her life. James appeared behind her, his expensive suit still pristine, his practiced smile returning. "Just a misunderstanding, officers," he said, his voice sweet as candy-coated poison. "My wife's pregnant, a bit emotional, as you know." He even extended a hand, as if this were a business meeting, not a domestic violence scene. But Detective Ramirez's gaze didn't waver. She looked straight at Emily, as if to say she understood what lay beneath James's polished exterior. Emily felt that empathy, like a ray of light in the dark night. She stood there, hands still cradling her belly, feeling her daughter's kicks as a reminder she had done the right thing. James, with all his charm and power, couldn't hide the truth forever. The kitchen, with its shattered crystal and dented wall, stood as undeniable evidence. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. The chandelier's light in the Beverly Hills mansion's living room illuminated costly art paintings, but it couldn't dispel the darkness enveloping Emily Sinclair. She sat on the Italian leather sofa, hands still cradling her 7-month pregnant belly, feeling her daughter's powerful kicks as if affirming she was right to call 911. Before her, Detective Laura Ramirez, with kind but piercing eyes honed by 15 years handling domestic violence cases, observed Emily's every gesture, as if reading a book filled with pages of pain. Emily began to speak, her voice trembling yet clear, like a river breaking through a dam. The argument at 8:30 p.m., sparked by a trivial matter about a charity gala, had turned into a nightmare when James Whitaker, the tech mogul whose smile once charmed entire boardrooms, shoved her twice and grabbed her hair, causing tears to fall and strands to snap. She lifted her shirt, revealing a dark bruise on her hip, a stark mark of James's rage. Detective Ramirez, with the calm of someone who had seen hundreds of similar stories, photographed the bruise with a professional camera, her gaze never leaving Emily. James, standing near the window, tried to interject with a smooth tone, like a Hollywood A-lister. She's swayed by pregnancy hormones. But Ramirez remained unshaken. She turned to Emily, her voice gentle yet weighty. Has this happened before? The question cut like a sharp knife through the protective shell Emily had built over 5 years of marriage. She hesitated, her eyes drifting to the perfectly framed family photos on the bookshelf, staged moments of false happiness orchestrated by James. Then she took a deep breath, as if drawing courage from her daughter's kicks in her womb. She admitted the truth. James tracked her every call through a GPS app, controlled their bank accounts to the point she couldn't buy a coffee without his approval. That's called financial responsibility, James interjected, his voice slick as if delivering a TED talk, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. Emily pressed on, her voice growing stronger, as if each word dismantled a brick in the wall of isolation James had built. She recounted her past as a marketing director at Apex Communications in San Francisco, where she managed million-dollar campaigns and won industry awards. But 3 years ago, James convinced her that quitting was better for our relationship, that he earned enough for her not to worry. Now she realized it wasn't support, it was a trap, wrapped in promises sweet as county fair cotton candy. Detective Ramirez nodded, jotting notes with the care of an archaeologist uncovering a buried secret, then stepped into the kitchen to inspect the scene. She noticed a fresh dent in the granite wall, shattered crystal fragments scattered like the wreckage of a broken dream. James, trailing behind, quickly shifted blame. Emily threw that glass. She lost control. But Emily, standing firm in the living room, countered with newfound resolve. No, you threw it. Right behind me. Her words, like a bullet piercing James's polished mask, made him falter, if only for a moment. Ramirez returned, her eyes now carrying the certainty of someone who had seen too many abusers try to hide their guilt. She asked Emily one final question, her voice soft but heavy as a hammer. Do you feel safe staying in this house tonight? Emily looked around the room, the luxurious furniture, the art collection curated by James, the wedding photo where she smiled naively. It all now seemed like a lavishly decorated prison, where she once thought herself a queen, but was merely a captive. No, she said, her voice steady, as if rediscovering a lost part of herself. Her daughter kicked hard, as if in agreement with the decision. Ramirez nodded, signaling Officer Tom Bradley to take notes. James, still pacing near the window, his phone buzzing incessantly, likely messages from powerful friends trying to salvage his image. But Emily was no longer a puppet in his play. She had opened the door to escape. Under the cold fluorescent lights of the Los Angeles police station, Emily Sinclair sat in the interrogation room, clutching a warm cup of tea, its steam a faint comfort amid the emotional storm raging within her. It was past midnight, yet her heart still pounded, as if she were still fleeing the opulent Beverly Hills kitchen where James Whitaker had left a bruise on her hip and fear in her soul. 7 months pregnant, Emily felt her daughter's powerful kicks, a reminder that she wasn't fighting just for herself. Detective Laura Ramirez returned, her eyes carrying the deep empathy of someone who had witnessed too many heartbreaking stories. She sat down, her voice gentle but firm, like a lighthouse piercing the fog. Most victims take months to decide to press charges. You called 911 right as it happened. That remark, like an invisible medal, made Emily realize a strength she didn't know she possessed. Emily began to speak, her voice like a stream flowing through cracks in stone, slow but unstoppable. She described James's control, each small, deliberate step like a magician weaving a net she didn't notice until she was trapped. 18 months ago, he installed a GPS tracking app on her phone, claiming it was for safety. She lost her job at Apex Communications in San Francisco, where she had been a marketing star, because James convinced her stress wasn't good for our family. Friends faded away, their invitations for coffee or dinner deftly replaced by James with lavish parties where she was merely an ornament by his side. Bank accounts, credit cards, all were under James's control, leaving her feeling like a guest in her own life. Ramirez nodded, jotting notes with the care of an archaeologist unearthing a buried secret. "That's classic abuse," she said, her voice even but sharp, like a verdict delivered. The interrogation room door opened, and attorney Olivia Chen stepped in, carrying the professional air of a woman who had spent her life fighting for people like Emily. With a leather briefcase and a determined gaze, Olivia explained she was from the Women's Legal Aid Organization, ready to represent her for free. She handed Emily protective order forms, each signature like a hammer strike against the wall James had built. When asked if she wanted to stay in the mansion or seek a shelter, Emily didn't hesitate. The Beverly Hills mansion, with its granite walls and dazzling chandeliers, was now just a beautifully decorated prison. She chose a shelter in downtown Los Angeles, a simple brick building with small balconies and a children's playground peeking behind a fence. Her room was small, with only a single bed and a wardrobe, but it was clean and safe, like the first breath after suffocation. There, she met Janet, the night supervisor, a woman with silver-streaked hair and a smile warm as freshly baked cookies. 60% of the women here are escaping controlling marriages, Janet said, her voice a promise that Emily wasn't alone. In the small room, Emily shared with Maria, a young woman from the next room, whose bright eyes bore invisible scars. Maria, her wrist, still in a cast from an accident with an ex-boyfriend, looked at Emily with awe. "You were brave to call 911-inch the moment." Those words, like a ray of sunlight piercing the night, made Emily feel a part of herself begin to heal. But then her phone buzzed, flooded with messages from James's friends and business associates, like a tidal wave. "Emily, think of James's reputation," one message read. "Pregnancy hormones made you misjudge him," another from his assistant. Each message was a needle stabbing her self-worth, but Emily turned off the phone, resolute not to let those lies drag her back. She looked around the humble room, devoid of granite or art, but filled with a freedom she had never felt in the million-dollar mansion. Her daughter kicked hard, as if cheering her mother on. The early morning sunlight filtered through the windows of the lawyer's office in downtown Los Angeles, illuminating stacks of papers on the desk, but it couldn't dispel the legal storm bearing down on Emily Sinclair. 7 months pregnant, she sat across from attorney Olivia Chen, hands cradling her belly, feeling her daughter's powerful kicks as a reminder of why she fought. Just hours after fleeing the Beverly Hills mansion, Emily had entered a new battle not with James Whitaker's fists or threats, but with his costly legal team and dirty tactics. Olivia, with eyes sharp as a warrior preparing for battle, announced that James had been released on bail but was barred from contacting her under a protective order. They filed for temporary spousal support and challenged the biased prenuptial agreement, drafted by James's lawyers to ensure she left with nothing. But James, true to his tech mogul style, didn't stop there. He played dirty, like a Hollywood villain with a bigger budget. James claimed Emily was mentally unstable, swayed by pregnancy hormones, even demanding a DNA test to question his paternity, a ploy to humiliate her. Worse, he froze their joint bank accounts, cutting off her funds, leaving her without a cent for food or doctor's bills. Emily felt a wave of self-blame, as if she had walked into this trap of dependency. She recalled the early days of marriage, when James convinced her to quit her job at Apex Communications, turning her from a talented marketing director into a woman reliant on a $300 monthly allowance. But then, like a ray of sunlight piercing a storm, her mother, Grace, appeared. Driving all night from Seattle, Grace enveloped Emily in a tight embrace, her salt and pepper hair disheveled but her eyes fierce with resolve. "He isolated you, not your fault," Grace said, her voice steady as an unshakable mountain. The support didn't end there. Hannah, her best friend from Apex days, drove from San Francisco, bringing memories of when Emily ran ad campaigns like a superstar. Hannah, with a mischievous smile like their old coffee runs after work, insisted Emily was stronger than she realized. Together they attended a support group at St. Paul's Church in Los Angeles, where survivors shared invisible scars. Linda, a woman around 50, spoke of 20 years under her ex-husband's financial control, now rebuilding her life as an accountant. Patricia, with a lawyer's sharp gaze, advised, "Check his hidden accounts. Men like James always have slush funds." Their words, like bricks building a fortress of hope in Emily's heart, showed her she wasn't alone. But the game-changing moment came from an unexpected message. Sophia Reynolds, James's ex-girlfriend, contacted her through Detective Laura Ramirez. "James abused me 2 years ago." Sophia, her tone both pained and resolute, revealed a pattern of control identical to Emily's GPS tracking, friend isolation, financial dominance. Her testimony was a bullet to the heart of James's empire. In the deposition at the lawyer's office, James sat across from Emily, his expensive suit failing to mask the panic in his eyes. As Olivia questioned him, he exposed himself, declaring Emily needed guidance and he was protecting her. Each word was a self-inflicted stab to his carefully crafted public image. Olivia, with the calm of a master chess player, presented evidence. GPS logs showing James checked Emily's location 15 times daily, texts demanding she report every move, and bank statements revealing he spent $5,000 monthly on restaurants while limiting her to $300. The climax came when Ramirez announced that 4 other women, former victims of James, agreed to testify. They painted a grim picture of a man who had spent a decade manipulating, controlling, and hurting women who trusted him. Emily, once feeling like a small voice, now realized she was the first spark in a blaze of justice. But James, with his $1 million legal team, still wielded immense resources. The golden sunset bathed the Pasadena, California sky, casting its glow on Emily Bennett's small apartment, where she was once Emily Sinclair, a name now tied to a painful past. She stood in the nursery, its pale yellow walls freshly painted, gently caressing the crib of Emma Grace Bennett, her 2-month-old daughter with bright black eyes, mirroring her mother's resilience. Just 8 months ago, Emily had trembled as she dialed 911-inch the opulent Beverly Hills kitchen, confronting James Whitaker, the millionaire husband who turned love into a prison. Now, she stood here, no longer a victim but a victor, a symbol for American women reclaiming freedom. The court had delivered justice. Emily received $4 million in assets, full custody of her daughter, and witnessed James's empire crumble under the light of truth. The trial was a resounding triumph, not just for Emily but for all the women James had manipulated. 4 other victims, inspired by Emily's courage, testified, exposing a decade-long pattern of abuse. James's reputation, once built on TED Talks and charity galas, shattered like the crystal in that kitchen that night. His tech company lost 60% of its stock value. Investors pulled out, and a federal investigation into his shady business dealings began. James, once a Silicon Valley king, was now a mere shadow, his supervised visits with Emma dwindling, then ceasing entirely as he fled to another state to escape his past. Emily reclaimed her maiden name Bennett as a declaration that she no longer belonged to James. She returned to Apex Communications in San Francisco, not in her old role, but in a flexible position for single mothers, where she rediscovered her marketing talents, once buried by James. Each campaign she crafted, each idea she pitched, was a step toward reclaiming herself, the woman who once believed she was merely an ornament in her husband's play. The Pasadena apartment, modest compared to the Beverly Hills mansion, was hers alone, free of granite or chandeliers but brimming with love and freedom. Emma grew up in that space, surrounded by pale yellow walls and her mother's laughter, untouched by arguments or lingering fear. But Emily's journey didn't end with personal victory. She became an advocate, a flame igniting hope for other women. One night, as Emma slept soundly in her crib, Emily's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, a pregnant woman isolated by her husband. "Your story gave me hope." With the generosity of someone who had walked through hell, Emily connected Sarah with Detective Laura Ramirez in the Los Angeles shelter, sharing a list of resources like a map to guide her. She founded a support group at her home, where women like Linda and Maria gathered, sharing stories and rebuilding their lives. Linda, now an accountant, celebrated her graduation. Maria, now a head nurse, inspired Emily with her own resilience. A year later, at a domestic violence conference in San Diego, Emily stood on the stage, her eyes radiant, gazing at an audience of social workers, lawyers, and survivors. Emma, in a stroller nearby, quietly played with a book about strong women, a gift from her grandmother, Grace. Emily spoke, her voice ringing like a triumphant anthem. "The strength to leave is the strength to rebuild." Her words, like a breeze sweeping through the room, touched the hearts of the audience. From a young teacher who had just escaped a controlling boyfriend to a police officer, now asking different questions in domestic violence calls, Emily didn't just share her story, she gave them hope, just as she had found hope in the small room at the shelter. She looked at Emma, now beginning to babble, and smiled a smile tinged with humor as she thought of James, who once believed she needed guidance, but was now a faded memory. Like an old movie on a late-night channel, Emma would grow up knowing her mother chose freedom over fear, truth over lies, and love over control. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe.